Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Noah Schwartz. This is Christina Packard. You can call her KP. That's what I'm going to do the rest of the night. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here in Howard County at a Mutiny Scratch Bar and Fresh Kitchen, and we are here to kick off Major League Quidditch Championships.
Absolutely. I'm super excited. I don't know about you, Noah.
Yeah. In fact, here's what I'm curious. I think that we should kind of go through what's going to be happening tomorrow. Go through the playing bracket, go through the championship bracket, and just kind of. How about you give me a feel about what you're expecting from Quidditch tomorrow? And so, just first and foremost, tell me what you're most excited about.
You know, I always get most excited about championship because it's a time to actually see how the different divisions stack up against each other. You know, obviously everyone already has sort of their set ideas of who's going to win each division, but then, you know, once you get all three of them together, it's kind of hard to say, okay, are the number ones from each division really going to match up against each other? Is there going to be like a 3 or 4 that's going to be able to knock off some other division's number 1? You know, there's always that contention, and no one really knows exactly what's going to happen until everyone gets to play against each other.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's interesting that you bring up this divisional parity, right, or maybe lack thereof. Tell me, who do you think's been the strongest division so far this season going into championships? Who do you think, as a divisional whole, we don't have to go on each team, but as a divisional whole, tell me, who do you think is going to have the strongest showing here this weekend?
So as a divisional whole, I think I personally have to say that the East is definitely one to watch. They had a whole bunch of parity even during the regular season. I mean, it came down to that third game with Washington and Boston to even determine who was going to be your 1, 2, and 3, right? So that means that there's, you know, a lot of equal playing field there, and no one knows how those 3 teams are going to be able to stack up. And if all 3 of them are able to stack up against someone like an Austin from the South, like, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the East is super, super deep. Every team here is gonna be exciting. We saw a really good showing even from the Charlotte Aviators, that 4 seed in the East. Last season, I'm really excited. They were my favorite team from championships last year. I'm excited to see how things happen this year. Now, you mentioned Austin. Why did you mention Austin?
I mentioned Austin because Austin is the only team this summer that really went 12-0 and kind of had pretty dominating performances throughout the entire season. I think even looking back at some of their games, I mean, it's basically they catch the snitch or they don't. I think they only had 1 snitch catch against them the entire season, which, I mean, if you can't close out and catch the snitch to try to either get back in the game because they're going to be ahead in quaffle points, then your team's going to be in trouble. So.
Yeah, and so now we've left out one division here.
Yep.
The North Division.
That's the one I know the most about. Yes.
Yep. Why did we leave them out? What's wrong with the North? Why no love for the North so far?
There is nothing wrong with the North at all. I think the North still comes in and it is like super contentious. I mean, everyone always sleeps on the North. Like, let's be real. Okay.
Agreed.
North is one of the strongest ones, but we're always slept on. We haven't had strong showings in the past. I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons we could probably talk about for that. But it's like, you know, anybody can come in and still win this. Minneapolis has had a super strong year. Rochester finished 2nd in the division. Indy's coming in with, you know, minimal losses. I mean, really only losing to Minneapolis this season, and they had a bit of a depleted roster at that. I mean, they dominated at North Championship despite having like 13, 14 players. So I'm excited to see what they do with the full roster.
And I know that you're a little biased,
I
but
am.
give us the North team to watch this tournament that you think can make the most noise.
Okay, so my bias is going to say Indy, obviously, because, you know, they're my team. Let's be real, okay? Indy's going to be the team to watch for sure. But I also have to give love to Minneapolis. They did beat us this season. They've had a stronger showing this season than they did last season. A lot more players really stepping up to the plate to be able to score. And we'll get more in depth with some of those players later on when we talk. But those are my 2 teams from the North to watch.
So that's an overview.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a good overview for those of y'all that are keeping up with us, you know, there at home. Let's start with the playing bracket, and let's start at the top of the playing bracket. Let's start with this New Orleans and Toronto game. And I've heard that a lot of people are really excited about this game. That they think it's going to be a bit more of a coin flip than ever before. These are 2 teams that haven't been to MLQ championships recently,
right,
and that we're seeing them again after long absences, and they're both going to be really excited to be here. So give me a little bit about the game. What's the matchup to watch? Who are some of the players to watch, perhaps? And what do you expect from that first game?
For New Orleans and Toronto, I mean, I think it's going to be a really close match. I've seen more of Toronto this season, but they really bring a really strong like offense to the game. Brian Melchior, he's one of their keepers. He also plays for the national team for Quidditch Canada. And he's really just a beast. He's one of those players that if you let him get speed, you're not going to be able to stop him very easily on defense. So I'm interested to see how New Orleans is going to be able to handle that. But at the same time, New Orleans has players like, Josh Mansfield, Sarah Nealing, who are very storied players, veteran players that understand what they can do to stop really any offense.
Yeah, I think the skeleton of that cursed team is really good. Like you mentioned, Josh Mansfield and Sarah Nealing.
Yeah.
Two of, I think, like one of the best beater duos in MLQ.
Right.
And they work really well together. They've been playing together for a long time, and that's going to be a lot of what New Orleans tries to do to win this game. Who do you think is going to come out on top?
I personally, no hate please, but I really want my Raiders to come out on top. I love the Raiders.
K-Pack, I didn't ask you who you want to win.
I know,
who is going to win.
Is of that game, Raiders. I'm going to say Raiders. Hot
Okay.
take a bit, but
That
I
is a
love
hot
the Raiders
take.
in that.
That is definitely a hot take. I think New Orleans comes out on top in that game, and it's going to be a really fun one. Y'all should definitely be there to check it out. Moving down now to Indy and Charlotte,
Ooh, yeah.
which I think is the most important game of the day one.
I do believe that is probably going to be the most important game of day one because that determines almost everything going forward for a large chunk of our bracket. I think both Indy and Charlotte are pretty scary teams that you have to come up against going forward, really. They both can be really physical. I know people talk about Charlotte and their size a lot, but Indy's really good at just, bringing the heat, bringing the beef, and, taking people down and being physical.
Yeah, the playing bracket can get a little complicated as you look down the line of how the games are going to go. But I think the important thing is both of those teams are going to realize winning this game is going to be the most important, not only for the day, but for their entire tournament. It's a lot more games to play if you lose that first game. And it's going to be really important for both those teams if they're looking to make a really serious run, which I think both teams are.
Oh, absolutely.
To win the first game. Like I said, I loved Charlotte last year. I loved how fast they were offensively, how they always looked for the break. They're a high-scoring team, and they have at least one key addition that's really, really revolutionized kind of their offense. That's Mwire Monwar, the captain of the UNC Charlotte, who's now on the Aviators. He's done a really good job ball handling for them this season. How is Indy going to plan to slow him down and make Charlotte more of what caused them problems last year, which is they're one-dimensional offensively?
Right. So Indy's definitely got some really strong defensive sets. I think people tend to sleep on some of the players that are on Indy's team. Kennedy Murphy is one of the smaller players in the league, but she's gonna be one of those people that's gonna grab you. She's gonna hold on, and she's gonna drag you down no matter who you are. I mean, you can be 3 times her size, and she's still gonna be able to take you down. So I think Indy will be able to pull off defensively and keep up with Charlotte in a good way.
Yeah, and the Charlotte beaters were awesome as well.
Yes.
I really like what they do and how they play. So I'm assuming that you have Indy.
Yes, of course I have Indy. If
Of course.
I don't have Indy, just drive me, just leave me to die here. But yeah, I have Indy.
I think Charlotte is going to be the most exciting team of this tournament, at least on day one.
Yeah.
Personally, again from last year, and I think Charlotte's going to be able to do it. And the reason that we say it's the most important game of day one is because Kansas City isn't bringing a full roster.
Correct.
They are one of the stronger teams in the playing bracket on paper, but without a lot of players coming to this event, they may not perform as well as they'd like.
Right.
So let's just move on to the winner of Indy Charlotte. Let's say it's Indy, right?
Right.
And Kansas City. Talk me through what Kansas City does have here and what you think can go right for them.
Yeah, so Kansas City still has, a lot of their strong players that have played big minutes for them coming back to championship. Justin DeWitt, he's, really their biggest beating threat on that entire team, and paired up with Kaylin Johnson, who during their Soldado series, both of them were key in really just keeping bloodsher control and making it so that Stampede was able to pull out their very first series win over the Soldados. And they also have Adam Heald coming in, Rachel Heald's brother at keeper, who, is definitely one of their bigger scoring threats, especially, paired with Vincent Reyes, who can play, who can play with Vincent Reyes, who can play both beater and chaser and be successful on both sides of it. So they're still bringing a lot of strong players, but they're also missing, they're Darian Mersick-Ellis, they're missing Aaron Grant, they're missing Joe Goulet, and those 3 players are some of their strongest quaffle players and also strong in their seeking game. So if they're not able to close out, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to pull off a win from whoever they play from the play-in.
Yeah, I expect that to be a little bit too much to overcome for them, But you never know. Kansas City, obviously, like you said, has plenty of talent and
Yep.
plenty of people that are here that are ready to compete. Let's go back up to the top
Yep.
of the play-in bracket between New Orleans and Toronto.
Yep.
Let's talk a little about Washington.
Yep.
Washington, another team that's really looking to make a deep run this year. That game is going to be critical. The one against the winner of New Orleans and Toronto. What do you expect to see from Washington? How far do you think they can get in this tournament?
So Washington is one of those teams that I'm really excited to watch. Just seeing how much contention they brought to the East Division. They were really the deciding factor in how the East Division was going to shape up in the top three. So I think they're one of those teams that not necessarily has been slept on, but they could very easily, without winning the East Division, also pull off big wins and go really far in this championship bracket.
Yeah, I think Washington for quite a few years now has been a tier below some of the best teams in Quidditch, but has always been a really strong threat and will continue to be so. And I think that this year could very well be the year that they break through into that sort of top tier.
Mm-hmm. They definitely have a lot of strong players that are coming into this game, and even without Rachel Heald being able to play due to her injury, I mean, they're still going to be a really big threat.
Yeah. So we've talked kind of about the teams in that play-in bracket, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
to recap, it's New Orleans and Toronto, Indy and Charlotte. New Orleans and Toronto play the winner. Washington will play the winner of that New Orleans and Toronto series. Kansas City will play the winner of that Indy-Charlotte series. And then the bracket starts to split, and those teams start to fight for what would ultimately be a second play-in spot.
Yep.
So it's going to be those 6 teams playing for 2 spots.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think will get those 2 spots from this play-in bracket?
Oh, okay. So from this playing bracket, this is a scary one. I think hands down Washington gets one of those spots. Like, no doubt about it, Washington is going to be one of those top 2. I think outside of there, my vote is for whoever wins the Indy-Charlotte game, so Indy in my opinion, but we will definitely see what happens from that because it's going to be a lot of who's going to be able to continue to play throughout the day, who's been conditioning throughout this entire summer, because while we've done, 3-game series, once you're going into this type of bracket where I think towards the end of the day you could have played, 5, 6, 7 games in a single day, it's going to be a lot and wear on teams that don't have as much roster depth for them to use later in the day.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important part about getting into the championship. And the most important part of the MLQ season as a whole is avoiding this play-in bracket altogether because it is brutal and it is grueling and it is a long day just to even have the opportunity to play for a title.
Yeah, I think when we were looking at it as Indy, we were like, man, we could play directly from 8:30 in the morning until 5:30 at night. Like, that's how long the day could potentially be if you just play your games right and wrong at the same time.
And it's definitely going to favor teams with depth. So I think the teams that bring bigger rosters are going to have a bigger advantage in that play-in bracket.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to the rest of the teams.
Yes.
Not just the best of the rest, but the best of the best. And let's start right up top with Boston. They're going to play the winner, or they're going to play one of those play-in teams. We're not sure yet. We'll let the play on the field decide that. Let's talk about Boston a little bit. What are the expectations for Boston? What do you think they're going to be able to do this series?
I mean, Boston always comes to championship as a championship contending team. For Boston, as someone who has won championship in the past, they come in and anything short of winning championship, I think is considered a failure for them. They have the heart, they have the drive. That's why they come here. So I think you really have to expect that Boston's going to put their all on the field no matter what, and really just try to make a run for that championship and for raising the Benepy Cup yet again.
Yeah, you look at that side of the bracket, and I think that left side of the bracket is definitely going to be an easier road to the championship than the right side of the bracket. I think.
For obvious reasons, yes.
No, I think not having Austin, New York,
Mm-hmm.
which are on the other side of the bracket. I think between Austin, New York, and Boston, you're looking at the 3 teams that are most likely to win
Absolutely.
MLQ championships. Now, so that's a big deal for Boston to be on what I would consider to be a much easier side of that bracket. And we'll see how they're able to do. I know that they've got some key contributors that also weren't able to be here this weekend. But for the most part, they'll be pretty healthy and pretty full.
Yeah.
And like you said, should be looking to be a title contender. Really quickly, let's step down to Minneapolis and San Antonio, right? I think would you say that's the most interesting game, the most interesting first game of the championship bracket?
For me, those are definitely some of the most interesting games. I mean, speaking from a side of somebody who's been a part of Indy for the last 2 seasons, Minneapolis, and San Antonio are both teams that we haven't beat the last 2 seasons. They're both really strong teams. They both have really fast offensives. They've got players in their quaffle game that are able to really move around the hoops, are able to have a lot of good lateral movement, have great passing players with great hands when they're off ball. Like, I think as a matchup, those two teams are so similar that that's going to be an exciting game to watch to see who's going to. I mean, at most, I think the first 2 games will be split, and the third game will really decide who comes out of that part of the bracket.
Interesting. I haven't seen a ton of Minneapolis play Quidditch. The last time I did, in any game that was really meaningful, was against Boston, and it went really poorly. This is this last MLQ championships. So my opinion of the Minneapolis team isn't very good going into this event. Do you think there's going to be any mental hurdles for a club that has been really good in the North, historically has always won the North, but comes to championships and has had hard times here against the other regions?
You know, I think in the past there might have been some mental blocks with that, especially Minneapolis being one of those like newer teams to MLQ. But I think in talking to some of the players that are on the team, like one of the things they've really tried to overcome this year is those mental blocks and really sort of just letting everyone on the team know, like, hey, we made it. We're number 1. We have the ability to play. We have the ability to build our confidence and beat these teams from the other divisions. So I really think this is the year that they're going to be able to take a win in that.
And speaking on San Antonio is a great Quidditch team.
San Antonio is a great Quidditch team.
Missing arguably the best Quidditch player in the world? Question mark, for sure. But yeah, I mean, the person that has scored the most points in the league this season, yes. And obviously we're talking about Miguel, not able to be here this weekend, was injured in that League City, within the first 5 minutes of that League City game, which is really big blow for San Antonio. But they have some key contributors that aren't him.
Yes.
Notably Mel Kite, who's been ball handling and playing off ball this year and providing a lot of the offense. Who besides her do you think can step up and be an offensive engine in the same way that Miguel has been for 2 years now?
Yeah, honestly, I think people tend to sleep on Jay Stewart. I think they forget that he has been a huge part of their offense as well this entire season. He's also, part of the national development roster, and I've watched him play multiple times, and he basically comes out and is always like the first person to get 3 goals, like right off the bat, get his hat trick, get 4 goals. I mean, he's definitely a threat on the pitch, and I think tends to get overshadowed a little bit by Miguel. So with Miguel not being there, I think Jay will finally get his chance to shine. And when he's not in that quaffle game, I mean, he's been catching snitches. So he's super key to San Antonio's offense.
Needless to say, tough matchup for Minneapolis, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a tough matchup, yes.
San Antonio, historically, really fast, really athletic. Some great beaters come out of that San Antonio area. I think San Antonio doesn't drop a game in this one. I think this is going to be too much for Minneapolis to overcome. But I am curious. I'm really excited. I guess I should say I'm really excited to see what Minneapolis can bring, because we have been waiting for the North to produce a Quidditch team that is capable of standing up to anybody. And San Antonio is a really, really good first test.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I just think they pair up really well together. For your fast, speedy Jay Stewart, I mean, Minneapolis has, Max Meyer to sort of counter it. For Mel Kite, I mean, if you haven't seen Emma Persons play yet this year, she is a player to watch on Minneapolis for sure. Definitely keep your eye on Emma Persons. She's scored a lot of their goals and really is just a gritty player on the field. Yeah,
so let's move over to the other side of the bracket really fast. Let's talk about the all-New York matchup. Rochester versus New York versus the Whiteout versus the Titans.
Right.
On paper, I would think that the Titans have a real advantage here.
I would agree with you there.
Really stable core of a team. They have they know what they're doing offensively. They're a team that's really relies on their sets, and everybody plays their role really well. What does Rochester have to do to disrupt New York?
I think Rochester really just has to come out and be able to move the ball around better than they did at North Championship. I know they were missing some key players at North Championship. They are still missing some key players here this weekend, but their ball movement and really just their movement towards the hoops needs to be better this weekend. There was a lot of scoring opportunities where I think they just didn't take advantage of the situation. Bludgers were down. They need to charge in and score, and they were sort of either caught up in passing it or maybe tired even with a more depleted roster. So I think Rochester really just has to come out and sort of not literally, but punch the game in the mouth, really, and just sort of make sure they're putting that ball through the hoop every single time that they can.
Maybe literally, as long as the refs aren't watching, right?
Sure.
So I actually think New York is one of those teams that is always on upset alert. I think New York gets really stagnant sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do a lot of ball watching, and they really rely on maybe a couple of players to to move off the ball effectively.
Yeah.
And I think any team that plays consistent either mark or zone defense, I think both are pretty solid. Perhaps zone a little bit better than mark. Has an opportunity to lull this New York team to sleep. And if the beaters don't get super active for New York, it can be a little flat sometimes for me. So maybe it's not Rochester, maybe it is Rochester, but I am curious to see exactly how well New York plays this weekend. Moving up to the last spot that we haven't talked about yet, the last team we haven't talked about yet, Austin, the Austin Outlaws.
Yeah.
How has Austin done this season?
Well,
Give me the overview.
Like I said, they've been undefeated this season. They've won a lot of their games quite handedly. I think, they've had a couple kind of close matches, prior to the intermission. But they've really seemed, super strong, almost unstoppable as typical. But like I said, that's one of the great things about coming here, where the divisions get to sort of face up against each other. And the big thing this year too is, like, we've had film of pretty much every single game. So who's to say that there's not some mastermind out there that has coached their team specifically on how, if we come up against Austin, this is exactly what we're going to do to beat them. And are they going to throw something that Austin's just not going to be ready for?
So do you see that happening?
I'm going to be honest, as somebody who always roots for the underdog, it's something that I want to happen.
Of course.
So I'm hoping there's somebody that's going to do that, but I can't say for certain if it is going to happen or not. That's not in my control, unfortunately.
Yeah, the team's pretty good, huh?
Yeah, their team is pretty good.
What team do you foresee, and it can be any team, it can be a play-in team or a championship bracket team, do you see giving Austin the most trouble this weekend?
I got to go with Boston. Boston's probably going to give Austin, and that's like the storied thing with MLQ, right? The Boston-Austin rivalry that we've had, for years upon years now at this point. Ian is absolutely beautiful. Yep, we're getting shout outs for Ian Skura. He's great, really just anywhere in their game. He's got some of the most assists, I think, in the league this year. Also really high on scoring goals, and I think he's caught a few snitches here or there. No? Okay, I'm thinking of someone else. That's my bad. That's outside my region. I apologize.
So for you think we're headed straight towards an Austin-Boston final?
I think we could very easily end up with an Austin-Boston rematch, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we've talked about a lot here so far. Are there any other players that do you want to make sure that people are watching?
I'm going to give a shout out to, obviously, my own team, Indy, a little bit here. Matt Brown's been a story player in the beater game. He's coming back from an Achilles injury, wasn't able to play last season, and he's really just been super strong for us this entire year. And really even in more than just playing. He's pretty much our beating coach. He works with all the players that we've had. He's built them up to be as strong as they are, because we do have quite a few rookies that are with us again this year. So I'm going to give Matt Brown a shout out.
Another indie player that somebody mentioned to me a little earlier was Riley Andrews.
Yes.
Utility player, does a lot. I think the quote was "balled out at champs."
Yes, that sounds like Riley.
And you maybe talk about a little bit about them.
So Riley's been a great addition to the team, especially in a season where I think at the beginning we really didn't know who we were going to throw into the seeking game. A lot of the indie seekers of past didn't play this year. We had Jeff Sywick leave, Matt Melton. And it sort of like put a question mark in that spot, and the snitch is still really important, right? Like, that's 35 points that can, be what either puts you way ahead and gets you closer to that set score, or, brings you back into the game if for whatever reason you're behind. So Riley's done a great job jumping into that position for us and has been successful. Plus, you can throw him into the chase. Throw him in the chasing game, throw him in the beater game, like literally throw any headband that you want on Riley, and he's going to be successful.
Yeah, and on that Austin Outlaws team, one person that was mentioned to me that maybe doesn't get a ton of mention previously was Kaiser Polzon, right? Mm-hmm. Plays for DA, was absolutely awesome versus the U.S. national team on ESPN. So watch for how the Austin Beaters kind of pivot around him and work through him to really give them that edge going to MLQ champs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Polzer has been absolutely like a beast, and I hadn't got to see him in person until the developmental team played, and it was really cool just to see because everyone went into, I think, that very first national team versus developmental team game and was like, oh, the national team definitely has this. But that developmental team, like, they kept blood control most of the time, and a lot of that was due to Polzin and his partner at the time, who unfortunately the name escapes me. But I mean, they were able to pull off so much that made that team successful.
Yeah, I just want to give another shout out to Howard County for hosting an absolutely awesome